Well, welcome to the NEC Summer Series. My name is Tanya Maggi, and I'm the Dean of Community Engagement and Professional Studies at NEC. I've been at NEC since 2003, and it's really a pleasure to be here today. I'm going to turn things over to one of our wonderful alumnas, Amanda Ekery, and she'll tell you a little bit about herself, and then we'll get started with our conversation. Amanda?
Thanks, Tanya. I'm really happy to be talking to you today. I graduated in 2018 with my master's in jazz performance, and now I'm still singing and composing, but I'm also the Assistant Director of Academic Affairs for the New School of Jazz and Contemporary Music, and also the founder and director of El Paso Jazz Girls. And I can kick things off. I'm curious to know how CPP started, and who were some of your first partners?
Awesome. Well, I love talking about the early years. They seem so long ago, and yet they are also very present in a lot of the original foundational elements of the CPP program, our Community Performances and Partnerships program, are really in play today. So the program started in 2003 in the fall. I was brought on really to examine the relationship of the conservatory to the Boston community, to look at how we might be able to meet need in the community around music education and performances for people who might not otherwise have access to them. And at the same time, to look at how we're training our conservatory students to be able to perform and work in community settings. So it was a pretty basic initial mandate. But from there, it became rapidly clear that there was such a hunger and need on the part of our community partners to be able to interact with the conservatory, and on the student side, that students really wanted to get outside of the practice room and be able to perform and work and teach and make connections in the community. So for me, it's been this beautiful journey to be able to shepherd this program. In the early days, I did a lot of cold calling and just walking around neighborhoods and meeting people. One partnership that we still have all these years later started, through a casual conversation in a bar. I just started talking about the program with someone, and they were like, "Oh, that sounds great. I work at this place, and I wonder if we could start to do some work together." So the initial years really were about listening and thinking about the role that a conservatory can play in a community and meeting need. We spent a lot of time looking at the educational landscape in particular and the lack of music education in so many schools, and just listening to how we could best serve our community. And then at the same time, looking at how to make a structure within the walls of NEC that would really work and be appealing to students, and make it part of, or an integral part of, life at the conservatory. And I'm really proud to say that all these years later, the program is still learning and growing, but really rooted, as I said, in many of those foundational principles that started at the beginning. Some of our initial partners were, we worked with the Boston Public Schools from the very beginning. So a lot of the schools that we were involved with way back then, we're still involved with now, and many, many more. There were a couple of senior centers and retirement centers that we worked with, that we had worked with previous to my arrival. And we augmented a lot of those partnerships and really built them out. But then we started adding so many more, such a wider scope of partners. We reached out to the Boston Public Library, to many of the museums and cultural landmarks like the Old South Meeting House in Boston, which is such a fun historic space for students to be able to perform in. We reached out to many homeless shelters, so we do have pretty robust partnerships across the city with a number of homeless shelters, and then hospitals, rehabilitative care facilities, so really a wide range of different types of partnerships. A long-winded answer to your question.
And no, it's good. Does anybody ever contact you, or is it usually like you reaching out to people?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. It kind of goes both ways. So in the beginning, we I was just kind of reaching out because I was trying to build the program, and I was thinking a lot about having a diversity of types of places that we would be going to. And but what I found was we'd go to one place and things would be going really well. We'd have a concert series at a library, and the librarian there would tell her friend who's at a different branch, and then that person would contact me. So a lot of our early years were built on word of mouth and trust. We did a good job, so people wanted to have the same kind of programming at their facility or school. Um, at a certain point, we reached like a maximum of partnerships, and maybe I think it was around the 8 to 10 year mark, we started really looking at our overall partnership roster, which currently is about 125 partners. So it's definitely grown over the years, and we realized that we wanted to maximize the partnerships where we could go really deep and have sustained relationship building over time, not just like a one-time auditorium concert in a gym of a high school, or one performance a year at a hospital. So we really wanted to try to have more ongoing partnership relationships, so that we focused on those partnerships most at this point, and that's been really, really rewarding on both sides.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In terms of the structure, can you talk about the fellowships and how they've come to be or changed over the years?
Sure, sure. And I'm going to also turn that question back to you as a former fellow. Sure. So the way the CPP program is structured, just to give the kind of like the big overview. So we have about 125 partners out in the community, and we meet with them each year to kind of assess what is it that you're looking for this year. Some years the partnerships remain the same, and then some years they may shift and change depending on changes that are going on at the partnering site. So then what we do on our side within the conservatory is we have a structure that allows students to participate as volunteers. So anyone in our student body can participate as a volunteer, and we have a listserv, so we post volunteer opportunities on there. But then students can apply through a competitive application process to be part of one of the fellowships. So we have 5 different fellowships each year. We have a broad community fellowship, so students will design a program that they might take to multiple sites over the course of the year as a performance with interaction and speaking. Or they might be in residence at one school, for example, and do multiple visits at the same place. So for example, we have students who, some of our composers have been in residence at a school and do composition projects with the kids that culminate in a performance at the end. So that's kind of an example of more of a residency. And then we have students who, might take a program and collaborate with another musician, and they might do it one time in a school, and then they might switch it up and do it in a nursing home, and they might do it in a hospital. So there are a lot of different ways that students can be involved with that particular program. We also have our musical storytelling fellowship. So for this program, students get to work with some of our youngest listeners. They get to go into early childhood classrooms and preschools with a creative storytelling program. So they may take a popular children's story or a fairy tale or a story that they've written themselves, and they set it to music. They also introduce their instrument, talk about sort of basic musical concepts. It's very much catered to young children, and we do bring in a lot of early emergent literacy components. So we're really emphasizing the relationship between reading and music. And it's a super fun way for students to tap into their creativity and, be able to be silly and have fun with their instruments in front of young children. So that's our musical storytelling fellowship. Our teaching fellowship, we place NEC students in sites around the city. This past year we had 25 teaching fellows. This is our most intensive fellowship, so students are going every week to the same school, and they're teaching for up to 3 hours a week. They might be doing sectionals in the class, they might be doing one-on-one lessons, they might be doing just helping the primary teacher in the classroom. Some students are teaching adult learners like seniors. We have a wonderful partnership with a program called Guitars for Vets. So we have a classical guitarist or a jazz guitarist working with veterans down in Brockton teaching guitar lessons one-on-one. So a really wide range of activities through that fellowship. We have a holiday ensemble fellowship where students perform in ensembles during the month of December. And then our ensemble fellowship takes place in the spring semester. Students apply as a group, and they spend half the semester learning how to do really great programming for community settings as an ensemble. And then the second half of the semester, they go out and perform. Overall, we generally have about 230 some odd students involved in our programs every year, which is a pretty significant number, again, in a variety of ways. And students end up doing about close to 700 events throughout the year, so teaching visits and other types of performances. And last year, we reached about 21,000 people through these programs. So it's very active and busy in a normal year, and we do have a lot of activities going on at all times. And I would turn it back to you just to maybe talk a little bit about your experiences in the fellowship program. You wore like 10 different fellowship hats. You got to kind of experience it all. So I think it'd be interesting just to hear a little bit about the types of things that you did through the fellowship program.
Yeah, I remember doing, the first one I did was like the songwriting fellowship with Dan at the McLean Psychiatric Hospital. And I remember getting super excited because at orientation, you did like a CPP presentation and that was on the list. And I was like, oh, I really want to do that one. And it was really great because I think all of the teaching that I had done up to then was very prescribed. Like it was at a music school, we're working on this book together and I'm going to see you every day or every week for a year. And this was like, oh, we get to design our curriculum. We get to like work with the patients and figure out what they want. And it was a lot more condensed. So like, what can we do every week that's new, that also is not building upon what we did last week for people who may not have been there. So that was really great. Also, I just love like working with the teenagers in the hospital because they had such good ideas and they just like wanted to hang and like sing and come up with lyrics and stuff. So that one was really fun. I also did the holiday fellowship, which was with a vocal quartet. And I like that one a lot because we did the library series. And I went to that library so much and I never knew that they had that giant auditorium. And I ended up meeting a woman who's from El Paso, which is where I'm from, during the concert, which was really fun. And we also did like a luncheon for the LGBTQ church series.
Yeah.
And that was nice too, because everybody, I feel like a lot of times in performances, you don't get to talk to people and it kind of just gets you talking about your work, but also just talking to people that you wouldn't normally maybe interact with during school.
Sure.
So I like that. It like makes you able to talk to different people about different things.
Yeah.
And then what else? I did the teaching fellowship with the Met Opera Guild, which I'm super grateful for because I still teach for them. And that was a whole different experience because it was with kindergartners at the Roxbury Early Education Center. And I had never taught students that young. And I remember thinking like, let's make a circle. And it was chaos. I was like, it was a real learning experience. And now I teach pre-K with the Met Opera Guild, so it's even younger, but I really have enjoyed it. And it was a really good learning experience. Also, they make you do like lesson plans and learning outcomes and stuff that just helps you for future teaching jobs that maybe you wouldn't do on your own. Like I would think of making a curriculum map for private lessons. But that was helpful. And then I also did the CPP class, which wasn't really a fellowship, but it was kind of like our ensemble. We like put together a program and went to the youth detention center, which was also I think it's just like all like really great learning experiences to see like how not only how you can adapt, but also just meeting people that you like live like blocks from.
Yeah.
So I liked all the fellowships that I did. Um, and I tried to do as many as I could. I did a few of the volunteer things too, because I wanted to try out some new material. But yeah, I just really loved all the opportunities because they were so varied. Um, and I learned from all of them.
I love how open you were also to being able to really throw yourself into new experiences. Um, and what you just said, one highlight is the opportunity to be able to really talk to people and have deep relationships outside of music, to be able to sort of fully participate in community life in Boston. And I hear again and again students say that they spend so many hours in the practice room, or in the classroom, and that when they pop into the car or onto the T to go to one of our partnering sites and really get to see their music out in the world, it's almost like this awakening. So it's for me, that's like the real joy in this work. And I just loved watching you in all of these different settings that you were able to work in while you were a student. So it's great to hear about those experiences.
Yeah, I think also I'm thinking about even outside, I feel like CPP equipped me to make those partnerships outside of school too, because I had ended up doing a bunch of work with like the Boys and Girls Club in Rosendale and the YMCA in Cambridge. And just everything that I had learned from CPP helped with those. And I still keep in contact with the people that I had worked with there. So it is true. It's like nice to not only be able to talk about your music, but like talk about what you want to do with people,
Yeah.
um, and get them on board, which is fun. I'm curious too, like this is my experience, but what are some other like student experiences that you hear? Like what are some alumni doing that have gone through the CPP program?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the great joys. Also, I get to stay in touch with a lot of alumni, because I've been at NEC for so long. I've been able to kind of track what alumni are doing over a long period of time. We did do actually a study at the 10-year mark of the program. So in 2014, we did a 10-year longitudinal study, just to see what students were up to. And it was just really amazing how, students maybe had tried a fellowship like musical storytelling, and then 10 years later they were running a concert series, a musical storytelling series at a local library. Actually, there's a wonderful example of a student from those early years who ended up founding an early music ensemble. And she was a musical storytelling fellow. And her early music ensemble now has a whole storytelling component to their work. And it's really become integral to a lot of what they're doing in the community. And they do all sorts of historical context for their instruments, and they tell stories about knights and princesses, and they do all this great work, which I just think is wonderful. And that grew out of some of her musical storytelling work. Many of our teaching fellows have gone on to not only continue to teach in the community, but many have actually ended up teaching at the sites they were placed at for their fellowships. So, we're really eager to have kind of a direct pipeline into the marketplace. I'm going to be very businessy for a second, but, for students to be able to take what they are learning and be able to directly apply it to what comes after school. So around this time, I would say almost every day, I'm getting a message from a student who is applying for a teaching job, and will I be a reference? And I'm talking to a lot of the references. So I think that the skills for that fellowship in particular are really equipping students to be able to just go right into continuing this work. And what I love is that a lot of the teaching work is not just straightforward, classroom teaching. It's really interesting teaching artist work. It's many of our students are working in urban classrooms, are working in El Sistema inspired programs, have really kind of embraced the whole range of different types of teaching work. So I love seeing that play out and staying in touch with students. to see what they're doing. And then many of our students just love performing for community audiences and talking about themselves. You know, many students go on to, you know, have primarily performance-based careers and are incorporating, you know, interactive performance into their work. Many string quartets that got their start at NEC and had never done community engagement before now are doing it fully as part of what they do in chamber music. So it's very gratifying to just see the ways that students are using this work in their lives in music.
Mhm. CPP also does a bunch of really valuable like trainings. Like you have like trainings for students. Like how do you decide the topics and what
Yeah.
you're going to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks. Well, when we did our 10-year longitudinal study, we asked the question, what did you find most valuable in terms of the training and that we offered? And number one was public speaking. So students really valued a focus on public speaking, and that is in front of a live audience, not on Zoom. But they really pointed to that as an important topic. So we do always have some kind of public speaking expert or facilitator come in and do a workshop with the students. We'll also do more informal peer-to-peer public speaking workshops. So that's really great. We have a lot of gatherings where we're really having students share what they're up to with each other. And we found it so invaluable for students to have the opportunity to come together as a community. And many times students will say, well, I never get to hang out with anyone who isn't a violinist in my studio. And here I am sitting next to a CI, you know, doctoral student, and like somebody over here who's, you know, in vocal pedagogy, and I'm hearing about their experiences and I'm inspired by the work that we're all doing. So that feels really great when we can bring all the students together to learn from each other. We also bring in alums to do workshops on teaching. We have a teaching boot camp every year, and we've brought in some of our spectacular alumni who are out teaching in the world to lead this. So that's been really great for students to hear from someone who's a little bit older, who's been out of school a few more years, but who really has a lot of practical experience in the classroom. So that's been great. And then the two classes that we offer, so we do offer community engagement for chamber ensembles, which you were in. You know, that's really focused on getting ensembles to work together to create effective programs. So groups, you know, to have the dedicated time to build a program and be able to like workshop it, that has proven to be really great for our students. And then the other class you referenced, which is uh, performing musicians in community health. The focus there is really to be able to take music out into healthcare, various healthcare settings, and to know the different ways to interact in a whole wide range of different healthcare settings. And that's really great because students get to look at the kind of at the field. They get to look at best practices in the field. They get to learn from music therapists. They get to interact with people who are using music in senior centers. They get to meet activity directors, and so it's a lot of, again, real world hands-on experience with different types of musical use in healthcare settings. So, and we're, you know, right now we're thinking about how do we adapt, how can we train our students to most effectively adapt their work to a virtual space? And I could talk a little bit about what we've been doing virtually, but one piece that we're really looking at is the professional development for the fall, and how do we do a training on best practices for teaching virtually. So that's something that we're shifting our attention to, you know, technological tools for teaching. So we're hoping to offer something in that area this fall.
Mm-hmm. Along those lines, I'm curious too, like how CPP's transitioning to virtual teaching, but on the student side, like are the partner schools helping with some equipment, or like how are things being changed, because they usually are like lower income schools?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely been a whole learning curve. Our last live program was on March 13th, and we sort of took the weekend to take stock, and that following week we were on the phone with our partners and in Zoom meetings with our partners, and like immediately trying to assess what can we do, what can we make go forward. And it was really interesting because some people reached out and said like, yes, let's get your students like doing live streams, Zooms, pre-recorded videos for our residents at a senior center. Um, let's do it. But then when it actually came down to like, how are we going to make this actually work for our residents? The technology piece wasn't quite there. So we did have some circumstances where there was a lot of interest and there just wasn't the technological connection. Um, we also had, though, circumstances where, our partners just did everything in their power to figure out how to get their, residents or the kids, access to the programming. So it was a little bit of a trial by fire, figuring out what would work, and we were able to do about 35 or so live stream, Zoom, or otherwise like pre-recorded events. And that wasn't teaching, that was like students going in as either like a guest artist or doing a interactive performance. And that was some for schools, some for senior centers. We had a partnership with a temporary field hospital here in Boston, the Boston Hope Hospital, and we were part of a large group of musicians sending videos to be part of the patient healing. That was a great project. So we were able to do a fair amount of work, and we're hoping to continue to transition, and work with our partners to do even more this year. Our teaching was the piece that just went just took right out of the gate. As soon as we were closed down, our partners were like, okay, let's make some teaching happen. It happened right away. And one partner in particular, we had just never been able to get teaching fellows to work there because of the location was a little tricky and the timing, and some logistics didn't quite work out. But the virtual space was a perfect solution, and we were able to set up 6 students to teach about 16 young people, ranging from elementary through high school and early adult. Um, and that was just this beautiful thing to watch unfold, that all these relationships were built, and several of those students are now teaching over the summer, and they've been hired by the organization. So that's just this wonderful silver lining, that we were able to really grow a lot of our teaching work. And we were just doing some calculations at the end of the year, and it looks like we did about 200 teaching visits between March 13th and mid-June. So some students just kept their teaching work going where they were already placed. Some schools just didn't have the bandwidth, and as you mentioned, the technology piece wasn't quite there. My understanding this summer is that there's a real ramping up of getting kids as connected as possible to get ready for the fall here in Boston. And I've been on several calls with the mayor's office and the Boston Public Schools and teaching artist community, and we're really all trying to get our kids in the community as much access to the arts as possible. So I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to do even more teaching work than we would even under normal circumstances. That's where we're putting a lot of our energy for the fall, because we know that can have sort of the greatest impact, and it's something that we really can transition most easily. And many of our students have just, they didn't even blink an eye. They just said, okay, let's make it work. And, they're figuring out what works best, and we're all, figuring out the best sound quality. And, we're hopeful that we'll have some more resources to give our students to be able to amplify and make their work even stronger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, along those lines, I'm just thinking, I think it's so great how you also like communicate with the school districts and with like Boston government, because like the policy in place is also such a huge game changer
Yeah.
for the work that you do. And along those lines, like how have you seen CPP and the work that you do as a tool for social change? Like how has it changed the Boston landscape?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always think about some of our core principles around approach to partnership that, we don't come in as just like we are the oldest continuously operating conservatory in the country and like we know what's best for music in Boston. That's really not our approach at all in our community work. Our approach is really how can we serve you? How can we meet your needs? How can we fill gaps that exist? My mindset is always as someone who wants to first go in and really listen and figure out how we can collaborate together. I think even just that approach, a collaborative, non-hierarchical approach, is really important. Um, and has allowed us to build relationships that are sustained over time with organizations who might not otherwise trust us, might not want anything to do with classical music or with a conservatory, might have preconceived notions of what a conservatory is all about. So I think the focus on how we can meet need in the city has been really really important, and to that end, we focused a lot of our efforts on where we can have the most impact over time. And that has been on programs like the El Sistema Inspired programs in Boston, where we're working alongside our partners to have impact on young people's lives. And that's not to make them, the next um, great orchestral musician or soloist, but really to think about how music plays a role in creating community. We've been really, I think, very honored to be able to sit at the table with our partners in thinking about that, how to make that kind of change. Some of our direct work, for example, with homeless shelters and in particular women's shelters, um, has been very impactful, not only on the women that we're working with, but also on our students. So this year we had an NEC student working as a teaching fellow at a homeless shelter as part of a choir, and she was working alongside an alum who has started this choir as part of his ensemble. So it's like this wonderful connection between alumni work, an alum doing this great work for social change out in the world, paired with a current student who's learning, working with wonderful musicians who are in our community at the women's shelter, all coming together to create a choir. And I love, again, that just thinking about social change as a collaborative effort, and that, it's something that we're really dedicated to in an ongoing way through all of our work. We don't just plop in and do one program and then leave, but that we're really continuing to reevaluate and think how we can have the most impact with our partners.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, I think CPP is such a great tool for not only like social change, but addressing like inequalities that
Yeah,
are within like not only the school districts, but also like just within pockets of the communities that don't get a
yeah,
lot of arts. Um,
yeah.
and it's easy to like, I don't think it's easy to gloss over that, but I think it's like important to highlight that because um, you can do the whole thing and not realize like what the impact like that you have at the end until you look back and see um, actually what you accomplished.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we do a lot of evaluation of our programs and impact. We meet with our partners, we get feedback from them, and if things aren't working or aren't as effective as they could be, we're really striving to change and grow alongside our partners. I will say, we're very lucky in Boston. I think there's such a strong focus on community-based artistic work that most of the major arts organizations, well, big and small, have a community or educational piece. There's been a lot of focus on raising the number of arts experiences that students can have while in school in the Boston Public Schools. The Boston Public School Arts Expansion Initiative has really raised the bar for partners working in the schools, for schools investing in the arts, hiring more arts teachers. So we've been just thrilled to see that response from the highest levels, and to be able to be part of that ecosystem has been really, really great over time.
Looking forward, like what are some highlights that are going to happen this school year with CPP?
Yeah, well, it's a good time to be asking that question because we really are thinking quite a lot about the year ahead. As mentioned, we're really excited about our teaching fellowship and getting as many students as possible involved with that program. We're already in meetings with partners to figure out how to make it work. We're all navigating this shifting landscape, so we're really trying to figure out, how we're going to go forward. But I'm very excited to see where that's going to go. Our musical storytelling fellowship. So we had this incredibly successful storytelling showcase that we transitioned online this past spring, and we had such great response. We're really going to try to build and grow that fellowship. We're going to have students directly working with young kids in classroom settings, but also hope to have some public shared virtual recordings. So we're excited about that. We are exploring some outdoor street performances. Not quite sure what that might look like, pop-up performances, weather permitting in the early part of the year. So we're really excited to see what that may look like. We're also going to use this year to really focus on professional development and training for students. So as I mentioned, we're hoping to have some kind of technology workshop to bring in people to talk about online teaching. We really are using this moment also as an inflection point or time to really reflect on our practices around equipping students to go into urban classrooms, to really understand racial inequity in our city and in the classrooms that they're walking into. So we're planning on having anti-racist training this fall. We're planning on really engaging our partners to be part of the dialogue with our students prior to going into the classroom. And we're excited to have this space, I think, to be able to engage more deeply with some of the training we've wanted to do for a while, but has been difficult with student schedules and other commitments to make happen. So we're really excited about all of that. And, most of all, I think just getting our students interacting with one another. I'm teaching my performing musicians and community health class, and have already lined up lots of guests who are going to come in and speak with the students, and people who aren't even in the area who I'm going to be able to engage to interact with the students. So there are many benefits that I see from being in a virtual space, at least for the near future. In closing, I would just say that we're really using this period of time to reflect on what's been working well with our partners, and our work. For me, this time has really highlighted all the things that we have done right, and the biggest one is building these relationships and building the trust, because that's what has allowed us to go forward in this kind of unknown, uncharted space. Our partners, we've trusted our partners, our partners have trusted us, and our students have trusted us as well to be able to do some things that might feel a little bit uncertain or a little scary. So that has been just a wonderful gift to be able to see so clearly. And it's also giving us the chance to see how important it is to be able to share music in this way, in these ways. we know it because we get to see it all the time. Those of us who are driving our students around to all of our programs, we get to see it every day. But it's giving us a chance to see our story sort of more broadly played out. And it's so hopeful. Despite all the uncertainty and the challenges, there's so much good in building this work. It certainly is my passion, and it's what keeps me going. And I love seeing our alums, such as yourself, out in the world doing really great work. So I really appreciate the time to chat with you.
Yes,
And
likewise.
yeah, so thank you so much.
And
Um,
thank you. Yeah, thank you for CVP has really like opened my eyes and like guided what I do now. And so I'm eternally grateful for NEC for having CPP and for your mentorship and guidance over the years. So thank you for today.
Great. Thanks so much, Amanda. It's really great to see you.
You too. Bye.
All right, be safe and well.